Good evening, everybody. I'd like to call this meeting of the Temecula City Council to order. Okay. I apologize that we're about 5 minutes or so late. We generally have an executive session before we come out here and have a public session, and ran just a little bit longer than usual. So we'll get started a little bit late. But we are here, and let's see. As usual, unfortunately, we didn't get a chance to hear the prelude music. Noah Stevens. Was there music by Noah Stevens?
He was here earlier, Mr. Mayor.
And I bet he did a good job.
Did a fabulous
Let's give him a hand in absentia. Okay. And we will open our meeting this evening with an invocation by Pastor Jim Diaz of Reliance Church. Pastor, would you come up, please? And that'll be followed by the flag salute, led tonight by our newest council member, Michael McCracken.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Let's pray. Father, thank you so much for who you are and how great you are. We thank you, Lord, that you are the beginning and the end of all things, Lord. And tonight, Lord, we invite you to this meeting. I do pray for Mr. Mayor and all the city council members, Lord, that you would give them wisdom in all the decisions that have to be made. I am so grateful for them. I thank you for them. I thank you for the city of Temecula. I thank you for our country and the freedoms that we have. And we just ask you to bless it and bless our city and bless our nation and bless these people here in this room. So we thank you again for being our God and our King. And we pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
So before we do the pledge tonight, as we face the flag and look at it, take in mind that this is something that we shouldn't take for granted. We're here tonight because of what the flag represents. So as we do this, remember all those men and women who served overseas, and let's be in unison with them. Please follow me.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, and thank you, Councilmember McCracken. That has kind of a nice ring to it, doesn't it? Yeah, I thought you would. I like it too.
Not.
And although Councilmember McCracken was sworn in at the end of the last meeting, this is your first full meeting. So again, welcome to this group. We're happy to have you. Okay, Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Councilmember Edwards? Here. Councilmember McCracken?
Here.
Councilmember Nagar?
So I'm third now in the roll call? Is that how that works?
Councilmember Nagar?
I'm here.
Councilmember Ron?
Just keep going.
Councilmember
here.
Ron? And Mayor Comchura?
I'm here as well. Thank you. We have a few presentations and proclamations this evening. The first one is for a couple of Eagle Scouts. So let me just get my house in order here for a moment. And do we have Jeremy Randall Duval and Jeremy Rozaket? I couldn't have said that right. Was I close? Rozaket. Yes. All right. Why don't you come up and I'll meet you up front. Hey. Good evening, gentlemen. We have a certificate for each of you, and I'm going to read just one because they're both the same. This one is for Jeremy Randall Duval. Which one? Jeremy. I picked this one because it was easy to pronounce. City of Temecula Certificate of Achievement. The City Council of the City of Temecula commends the outstanding achievement of Jeremy Randall Duval of Troop Number 910. We congratulate Jeremy for his achievement on receiving the rank of Eagle Scout, which is the highest achievement earned in scouting. We are proud of Jeremy's accomplishment and wish him continued success in his promising and bright future. In witness whereof I have hereto affixed my hand and city seal this 12th day of May, 2015. Congratulations, young man. And for Jeremy Ruscat, the same.
Thank you, sir.
Congratulations. No, that was two very firm handshakes, the real measure of a man as he matures. We also have a special pin that we had crafted several years ago, and we know you don't have nearly enough badges on your sash and the like. So, so here's another one, strictly for Eagle Scouts within the city of Temecula. And what comes with getting all these little gifts is that you need to tell us about your Eagle project. So, one at a time, have at it.
All right, so for my project, I did it at Rancho Damacitas Children's Home out in Temecula's wine country, and what I did was construct a 50-foot long chain link fence alongside the top of a hill, and it's next to this, the side of a volleyball court, so it increases the safety for the little kids as they play volleyball, and the ball doesn't roll down the hill because the fence is there to stop it. And then, in addition to the 50-foot fence, I constructed a 10-by-10 concrete slab, and on top of the slab, we assembled a all-weather shed that they can use for storage equipment and sports equipment.
Very good, thank you. Beat that.
I don't know. Well, for what I did, I built a check station for the Fish and Game off of Buck Road, right by Lake Skinner, where you check in and out while you're on there, so the Fish and Game know where, like, who's on the property and who's not. And it's also a hunting ground, so there's places where you mark, for example, like if you're hunting out there, you mark what you got and you drop it in a little slot that we made in the desk, which has a drawer that the Fish and Game have control of who opens it and everything. And it originally started as taking down the original one, but it turned out to be we had to make another one from across the little path from it, which mine's a little better than the other one, but but they threw a little of their twist on there, but we just built a really big kiosk for them.
Well done.
Excellent.
Congratulations to the team of Jeremy and Jeremy.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have a proclamation that I'm going to present to our Public Works Director, Tom Garcia. Tom, I think you can just sit there and I'll read it. Nobody wants to see us up there. But yeah, this is really a very important proclamation, and we try to acknowledge our Public Works team once a year during this particular week. And for those of you who aren't familiar how things work day to day in a city, this city or any other city, one of the most important things we do is build roads, maintain buildings, all the things that may not be terribly glamorous, but the things that we would not be a city without. And that's what the Public Works Department does. And so I'd like to read this City of Temecula Proclamation. Whereas public works services provided in our community are an integral part of our citizens' everyday lives, and whereas the support and understanding of an informed citizenry is vital to the efficient operation of public works systems and programs, such as streets and highways, land development, stormwater management, public buildings and grounds, parks and infrastructure maintenance, and whereas the health and safety and comfort of the community greatly depends on these services, and whereas the quality and effectiveness of these services, as well as their planning, design, and construction, is vitally dependent upon the efforts and skills of the public works personnel, and whereas the efficiency of the qualified and dedicated personnel who staff public works departments is influenced by the people's attitude and understanding of the importance of the work they perform. Now therefore I, Jeff Camachero, on behalf of the City Council of the City of Temecula, do hereby proclaim the week of May 17th through May 23rd, 2015, to be National Public Works Week. Community begins here in the City of Temecula, and I encourage all citizens and civic organizations to acquaint themselves with the issues involved in providing public works services, and to recognize the contributions which public works officials make every day to our health, safety, and comfort, including our quality of life. With that, Tom? Tom is just representative of that department. There are a whole group of people who work for him who are equally deserving, so appreciate what you do, Tom. Okay, and our final presentation this evening we have certificates of valor, something that we don't often distribute here, and it's nice to be able to Clayton Halstead and Noah Treadway, if you'll come forward. And there's a third, Michael Johns, who we understand could not make it tonight. Looks like maybe only one could make it tonight. But nonetheless, I'd like to join you. Go ahead.
I'm outstanding.
And your name?
I'm Clayton.
Clayton.
Yeah, Noah became increasingly ill as the day progressed.
Okay, well, would you please give him our best if you speak
I
to him?
will eventually.
Okay, well, yeah. Well, eventually. But you know, we love to joke and have a good time up here, but sometimes we deal with things that are far more serious than that. And this is one of those times, and I'd like to read this. On behalf of the City of Temecula, this is a certificate of valor. Presented on behalf of the City Council and the citizens of the City of Temecula to Clayton Halstead, in recognition of your heroic efforts to render aid and attempt to save the life of Kenneth Denver Dean of Temecula. On March 18, 2015, 21-year-old Denver was involved in a vehicle accident. Clayton Halstead and his friend Noah Treadway were driving home when they witnessed the accident and stopped to render assistance. Michael Johns, an off-duty EMT, also stopped to provide help. Making every effort to save Denver's life while risking their own, the men rushed to remove Denver from the burning vehicle and pulled him to safety prior to the truck exploding. Although these men did everything they could to save Denver's life, he unfortunately passed away from his injuries. The City Council is proud to present the Certificate of Valor to Clayton for his selfless act of heroism in the attempt to save Denver's life, and we are honored to have you as a member of our community. Thank you. Slide.
Thank you. You know, someone told me recently after the incident, you hope that nothing like this ever happens. But if it does, you hope that you're ready for it. Even now, I'm still not sure I was ready for it, or that maybe we even did everything we could do, but it's one of those things where you don't really think, you just do. And I've lived in Temecula my basically entire life, and the values and core that I've learned not only from my parents but from the teachers and the school system and everyone else who's here is really what it's all about here. And I'm not the only one who deserves the standing ovation. It's everyone here who lives in this amazing city that I've called home for a really long time. So I very much appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
I have to tell you, Clayton, as the mayor of this city, I value what you just said as much as I value the act that you performed. Thank you very much. Okay, this is a time we set aside for public comment. A total of 30 minutes is provided for members of the public to address the City Council on items that appear within the consent calendar or a matter not listed on the agenda. Each speaker is limited to 3 minutes. If the speaker chooses to address the City Council on an item listed on the consent calendar or a matter not listed on the agenda, a request to speak form must be filled out and filed with the City Clerk prior to the City Council addressing public comments and the consent calendar. Once the speaker is called to speak, please come forward and state your name for the record. For all public hearing or council business items on the agenda, a request to speak form may be filled out and filed with the City Clerk prior to the City Council addressing that item, and each speaker on agenda items is limited to 5 minutes. I understand we have one speaker tonight, or do we have more?
We do, Mr. Mayor. We have one speaker under public comments, Chuck Rear.
Honorable Mayor and council members, I've been around before a lot of you people were even a gleam in your parents' eyes. But there's nothing, when I was a kid, I was taught to ride my bicycle on the street, opposing traffic so you could see what was coming at you. Now they've got bicycle lanes going with traffic, but the people are still riding their bicycles on the sidewalk. And I think they ought to be cited for it, because when you're walking down the street and he comes whizzing by you and you don't see him coming, you've got stripes in your shorts. And it's very alarming, and they really ought to be ticketed, because it's totally wrong. And that's all I've got to say. And this is about the 8th time I've been here, and I still don't know all of you people. Comes with age. Thank you.
We've changed a little too up here. Thank you, sir. Appreciate the comments.
Thank you.
Okay, no further public speakers. I know we have somebody on consent calendar. Okay. City council reports. Anybody got anything? Okay, well then, neither do I. We'll move right along. Next up is the consent calendar. All matters listed under the consent calendar are considered to be routine and will all be enacted by one roll call vote. There will be no discussion of these items unless members of the City Council request specific items be removed from the consent calendar for separate action. Item 1, waive the reading of standard ordinances and resolutions. Item 2, approve the action minutes of April 28th, 2015. 3, approve the list of demands. 4, approve the City Treasurer's report as of March 31st, 2015. Item 5, authorize the mayor to send a letter of support for SB 16, Budgetary Cost Savings Plan, State Highway Operation and Protection Program. Item 6, approve 2015 legislative platform and legislative program policy and procedures, and this at the request of Council Members Edwards and Rahm. Item 7, approve the third amendment to the agreement with Temecula Motorsports, Inc. for police motorcycle repair and maintenance. Item 8 will be pulled for a speaker, but that is approve the sponsorship agreement with our Nicholas Foundation for the 2015 Temecula Valley Holistic Health and Wellness Fair. Item 9, approve the third amendment to the agreement with Counts Unlimited, Inc. for citywide traffic count data collection. And item 10, approve the amendments to annual agreements for various maintenance and repair services related to the HVAC system, water quality, parking lots, excavation and general contracting, elevators, roofing, asphalt paving and parks, facilities, and street signs for fiscal year 2015-16. So unless there's any comment, we'll entertain a motion for the consent calendar with the exception of item 8. Mr. McCracken.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to abstain from item 2.1.
Duly noted. We have a motion for the balance then? So
Second.
that's for everything other than item 8, correct? Mm-hmm. Okay. I have nothing of note on my screen, so let's take a voice vote. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. And that will bring us to item 8. Again, approve the sponsorship agreement with our Nicholas Foundation for the 2015 Temecula Valley Holistic Health and Wellness Fair. May we have that speaker, please?
Mr. Mayor, the speaker is Leslie Keegan.
Thank you. And just while she's coming up, you noted the abstention by Mr. McCracken on the minutes.
So noted.
Good, thank you. Good evening.
Hi, good evening. Thank you. My name is Leslie Keegan. I'm an employee of Cultivating Good. We own Eat Marketplace, which you might be familiar with. Our event that we're putting on is the Holistic Health and Wellness Fair. The mission of the Holistic Health and Wellness Fair is to provide the public education regarding alternative and complementary health care and information about the availability of holistic health practitioners and businesses within the community. Our goal is to place an emphasis on these for the special needs community. And I'm here solely in support of item 8 on the consent calendar.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Keegan.
Thank you.
We have a
Move the
motion-
item.
Motion by Mr. Nagara, second by Mrs. Edwards for item 8. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. And that takes us to the Temecula Community Services District meeting and our president, Marianne Edwards.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to call this meeting of Temecula Community Services District to order. And could we have the roll call, please?
Director Comachero,
Here.
Director McCracken, Director Nagar,
Here.
Director Ron,
Here.
President Edwards.
And I'm here. Do we have any public comments?
We do not.
We do not. Then moving on to the consent calendar. Notice to the public, all matters listed under consent calendar are considered to be routine and all will be enacted by one roll call vote. There will be no discussion of these items unless members of the Temecula Community Services District request specific items be removed from the consent calendar for separate action. Item number 11, approve the action minutes of April 28, 2015. Item number 12, approve an agreement with Pirates Pyrotechnics Group, LLC for 4th of July fireworks display. Already. And do I have a motion for approval?
So moved.
And we're going to note an abstention, Mr.
Yes,
McCracken?
item number 11, ma'am.
All right, item number 11. And I have a motion and
I'll second.
a second. Okay, and I have stuff on my screen, so.
Go for it. I can't vote.
Okay,
For the record, I vote yes.
all right, so, yeah, there we go. So we have 4 showing on the screen, and the mayor votes yes also.
Absolutely, the record will reflect a unanimous vote.
Thank you, with an abstention by Chief McCracken. Thank you.
Correct.
And moving on, as she turns the page, are there any reports this evening?
Yes, yes, yes.
All right, I'm looking at Kevin.
Couple of items, Madam President.
Surprise.
Yes. Now, just a reminder that Western Days returns to Old Town on Saturday and Sunday from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. There we go. Don't miss the live music, calf roping lessons, chili cook-off, and of course, the high noon shootout by the Old Town Temecula Gunfighters. On Tuesday, May 19th at 10 o'clock a.m., the current multipurpose room at the Community Recreation Center will be dedicated and renamed the Perry Peters Community Room. Now, if you recall, this is a council-initiated effort which recognizes Perry for his can-do spirit, community contributions, and leadership of the Friends of the Ronald Reagan Sports Park. And then finally, Memorial Day is Monday, May 25th, and this year's activities begin at the Duck Pond with a brief ceremony at 8:30 a.m. Participants are then invited to the Temecula Public Cemetery for the traditional observance at 10 o'clock a.m., concluding with the Memorial Day barbecue at the VFW Post 4089 on DS Road. So for additional information on any of these events, please contact the Community Services Department, 951-694-6480. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Hawkins. Anything, Mr. Managing Director?
Nothing further tonight, Madam President.
All right, board members, anything? No? All right, then I will call for adjournment. Do I have a motion?
I'll move.
Motion and
Second.
a second for adjournment. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And we stand adjourned. Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to reconvene the Temecula City Council meeting. We have 2 items on the agenda before we adjourn. The first is item 13, to consider city council appointments to committees as a result of the appointment of city council member Michael McCracken. So as I'm sure most of you know, or if you don't, our previous council member, who we were sorry to see go, but we're happy to see his replacement, was council member Chuck Washington, who is now county supervisor Chuck Washington. So we lost him to a higher authority. And as a result of that, we have an awful lot of committees and commissions that we all serve on in addition to these meetings every other Tuesday night. And so we need to take a look at those committees that now Supervisor Washington served on and how we're going to replace him on those committees. You know, we can do this kind of informally, I think, and why don't we just go down the list of every place where we have a vacancy, and we can do whatever everybody's pleasure is and then go ahead and enact it with one vote at the end, unless there's some reason to vote individually. If there is, we can do that. I would think that the natural tendency will be to just put Mr. McCracken on most of the ones that Mr. Washington was on, but again, if there's reason to discuss that, we can certainly discuss it.
It's only 50 or 60.
So, yeah, so I'm just going to go down the list. Hopefully I won't miss any. The Community Services Commission liaison, I think Michael is a natural
That's a
for
natural,
that.
yes.
So that's easy. The next one is on a committee with Marianne Edwards, the E-Government and Temecula Outreach Committee. Any reason not to put Mike on there?
No?
I shouldn't say not. Any reason to put anybody other than Mike on there would be a nicer way to say it. No, okay. Mike, if there's something you don't want, speak up, okay?
Gladly.
Okay. Going forward, the Finance Committee.
No, sir.
He was pretty adamant about that.
What was that?
I'm speaking up.
Oh, okay. Okay,
I'll take finance.
Thank you.
okay, you got it.
Who else is on that?
Mrs. Edwards with Mr. Nagar.
That's what I thought. I was going to take it, but
Yeah,
You're already
you
there.
can't take it. Joint City Council TV USD Committee.
I like that one, sir.
You got it.
That's me.
Yeah, with Mrs. Edwards.
Mm-hmm.
You're at a Temecula Committee with Mr. Nagar.
I like that one, sir.
It's easy. Parks and Recreation Committee with me. Uh-oh.
Think
That's a
about that one.
no-brainer.
Yes, 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 and
Yeah.
yes.
Okay. Be a pleasure, sir. Okay, then we have representative assignments to external agencies. Let's see what we got there.
Sister City.
All we have is Sister City Liaison. Everything else was already covered.
Thank you. I'll take that one.
Okay, good. And then these are representative assignments to other external organizations for which they may include a stipend, and that's, we always want to make sure we disclose that. Let's see, we've got a vacant alternate on the Riverside Conservation Agency with Mrs. Edwards as the primary.
I'll take that one.
Okay. Riverside County Habitat Conservation Agency Board, that's already covered, I'm sorry.
Next one.
Riverside County Transportation Commission, Mr. Nagar is the primary.
I'll be a good backup for you.
Okay.
A good one.
Riverside Transit Agency, Mrs. Edwards is the primary, and Mr. Ron is already on there. And WRCOG,
Mayor, I'm serving, I was the alternate, and I've stepped into the primary, and I'd like to keep that if possible.
Mike, you okay taking the alternate position on that? Mike McCracken?
Yes,
We're going to
thank
have
you.
to settle this here, Mike, the Mike show.
Yeah.
Okay, so Mr. Nagar will move into the primary, and Mr. McCracken, everybody okay with that?
WR Carr, correct?
Yes.
WRCOG, yes.
Excellent.
Okay, then these are ad hoc subcommittees. There are generally 2 members on each of these committees. And we've got the 2015 Civic Center Concert Ad Hoc Subcommittee with me.
Love to.
Perfect.
Okay. Often those benefit veterans in some way, shape, or form, so it's a good place for you. 2015 Community Services Funding Ad Hoc Subcommittee with Mr. Nagar.
Love to.
Okay. Diaz Property Ad Hoc Subcommittee with Mr. Nagar. You know, if you don't mind, I'd like to have that. If you want it, I'll
Read my
concede that.
mind. Thank you.
Okay. And that's with Mike Nagar. So Mike, you and I will do that.
Sounds good.
Higher Education Ad Hoc Subcommittee with Councilmember Ron.
I'd love to take that one.
You got it. That's a good one. They're all good. Hospital Ad Hoc Subcommittee with Mr. Nagar.
I'll take that one.
Told you there were 50 or 60.
Now we're getting there. Jefferson Corridor Ad Hoc Subcommittee with me.
Yes, take that one, please.
Okay. Luxury Car Dealer Ad Hoc Subcommittee with Councilmember Ron.
I drive a Toyota.
You don't get to keep
But it's
anything.
it's a luxury Toyota, right?
They don't give out samples at that one.
I'll take that one.
Okay.
Samples?
Madera Vista Development Ad Hoc Subcommittee, do we still need that one? I guess we do. Okay, with Councilmember Ron? Mike?
That one always goes to the new guy. That one always goes to the new guy.
Always goes to
You
the
don't
mayor.
have a choice.
Mike, you have no choice, you got it.
Yes.
Okay,
I'll take that one. But the new guy is going to stop in a couple of meetings.
all right. 2015 Military Ad Hoc Subcommittee, you and I, how about that?
Thank you. Thank
We'll
you.
knock 'em dead,
Thank you.
right?
Thank you.
I like
take
it.
that one gladly.
For those of you who don't know, Chief McCracken is a 24-year Navy veteran, retired, so I know that veterans issues are very close to your heart as they are to mine, so look forward to working with you. Murrieta Creek Project Ad Hoc Subcommittee with Mr. Nagar.
Actually, I would like to get back on that one.
You
And
know what? I think that's appropriate since you had to leave because of a job commitment, but that no longer exists. So Mike, you okay with that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and that's with Mr. Nagar. Old Town, no, that's okay. Quality of Life Youth Master Plan Ad Hoc Subcommittee with Mr. Nagar.
I'd like to take that one.
Okay. Supportive Housing Services Ad Hoc Subcommittee with Mr. Nagar.
Yes, please.
Teen Village Ad Hoc Subcommittee with me.
Yes.
That's a
We
fun
got to get that one moving.
Yeah, that's a fun one.
TVE 2, Small Business Incubator Ad Hoc Subcommittee with me.
Take that one. Thank you.
Okay. And that's it.
Good job.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, we got through that. Everybody comfortable with that? Anybody, before we make a motion, anybody seek any changes? Okay, then we'll entertain a motion.
I will move it.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve what we just went through as item 13. I'm still, don't have anything here except for a note that says Sire, so all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. And that will take us to the final item on our agenda. Item 14, receive a status update and review of the Uptown Jefferson specific plan. Just to set this up for a moment, 2 weeks ago at our previous meeting, we entertained a motion and approved a motion for a temporary moratorium on development in this, on non-conforming development, I should say, within this corridor. And we felt as a body that it was advantageous before it ever comes back to us for further action that we get a full update and review of the specific plan itself. So we'll start that. And Mr. Thorson, I believe you have a statement to say?
Yes, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council. We just wanted to emphasize that this agenda item is designed to introduce the general vision and outline the Uptown Jefferson specific plan to the City Council. The actual draft of the specific plan will be made available to the public in the next few days. The Planning Commission and the City Council will conduct public hearings, at which time the Planning Commission and the City Council will review in detail the text of the specific plan and the specific provisions of it. We expect many questions will be asked and concerns raised about the types of projects that will be allowed under the new specific plan, as well as development standards and road configurations. These details are specifically contained in the text of the specific plan and will be discussed by the Planning Commission and City Council. We did, as I say, I wanted to emphasize that while these questions and concerns may be raised and expressed tonight, staff simply is not in a position to discuss specific projects and specific portions of the plan because we've not yet released the text of the specific plan. So while this is a general overview of the vision and the outline of the plan, there's still plenty of time to get into the details. So I just wanted to make that clear to everyone.
Peter, just to clarify a little bit further, if I can paraphrase what you're saying a little bit, staff is not prepared to respond to specific questions, not because they don't want to, we want to withhold anything, but the document is still tentative in nature. It will change again. It will go through public review. And so this is just meant to be an update for you and for us to know the progress of the specific plan so far. So with that, Mr. Watson, would you
Mr.
give
Mayor,
us an update?
Members of the council, thank you. Good evening. Before you tonight is the Uptown Jefferson Specific Plan status update, as Peter mentioned. And as he mentioned as well, last week, or 2 weeks ago, City Council directed staff to bring forward this status update to give council information on where the plan is in the process. And that's what I'm here to do tonight.
Luke, would you either get closer to the mic or speak up a little bit?
Is that better?
I don't know. When you start talking, we'll figure it out.
Right.
Sounds better.
Okay, great. There's a large amount of information in this presentation. I've tried to organize it logically and break it down into 3 sections. The first section is the background and context, so talking about the existing conditions of the specific plan area, as well as kind of the general idea of why the specific plan is being developed and the vision that the community has for the future of the area. The second section is really the meat of the presentation. It's the contents of the draft plan itself, and then the final section, which is pretty short, is just the conclusion and next steps. So we'll just jump right in. Section 1 is the background and specific plan context. The question has been asked, why did the community develop this specific plan? And to answer that question, you really need to start by looking at the area itself. So this is the specific plan area. It's bordered to the south by Rancho California Road, to the north by Cherry, to the east by I-15, and Marietta Creek to the west. It's 560 acres total. Almost half of that is the creek itself. It's primarily suburban commercial development. There's no existing residential or mixed use. It's about 3.8 million square feet total. And while there are many successful businesses in the area, it's generally considered to be lagging behind the rest of the community, and it's not well positioned for the future growth that we anticipate. So how do we position it to be in a better position to capture the growth of the future? To do that, the first thing we did is we went out to the community to get their vision. We held 6 public visioning meetings with the community, as well as 6 steering committee meetings, which the steering committee is made up of commission members of the city commissions, to get their input on what they want to see this area turn into in the future. This was a very successful outreach process. These are some of the topics that we discovered in individual meetings. These are some of the visuals that were created during those meetings. We were literally throwing things up. The community was throwing ideas on the wall and putting it together. And through those meetings, ultimately, a vision started to emerge. And so what will the Uptown Jefferson look like once the community's vision is achieved? Well, the community's vision is a vibrant, sophisticated destination, an urban and unique, diverse districts, neighborhoods, a true mixed-use environment that includes homes, shops, offices, and restaurants, a mix of locally owned and corporate businesses, a place where high-quality jobs and housing are in close proximity to each other, thriving, creative, and innovative business and education opportunities, expanded tourism, hotels, and convention and meeting spaces. As far as mobility is concerned, the community wants to see a safe, walkable, and bicycle-friendly environment, and that includes new streets, new sidewalks, new trail connections, not only within the area, but also to the rest of the city and the rest of the region. And of course, what Temecula does very well is parks and recreation. So that overall vision was summarized by the community into 8 specific policy recommendations that they gave staff to go forward with to develop a specific plan. And the first generally is to strengthen economic development. Second is, as I mentioned, expand the mix of uses, and specifically to include residential. 3 is to define districts and neighborhoods throughout the area. 4 is to improve transportation, mobility, connectivity, and circulation. 5 is to integrate recreation, open spaces, and trails. 6 is to create updated and flexible development centers, and this is really the heart and soul of the specific plan. I'll get into the details of this coming up. Number 7 was to build and maintain a comprehensive utility infrastructure system, and 8 was to establish a distinct identity, not only for Uptown Jefferson as a whole, but for the individual districts within the specific plan area. The community also gave us a guiding principle. They wanted us to make sure that the specific plan was based in economic and market realities. So in order to make sure that we did that, and we weren't just creating a pie-in-the-sky plan that could never be achieved, we hired Kaiser Marston Associates to do a market study, and they looked at market demand over the next 10 years. And this is what they found by land use. So in total, what they found the market would sustain over the next 10 years is somewhere between 2.4 and 4.1 million square feet of development. This is the summary from that study of the market strength over the next 10 years, so the near term, midterm, and long term. The study was actually done in 2012, so we're about 2 years into the near term. And I've recently spoke with Kaiser Marston, and they said that they would change the hotel in the near term actually to moderate at this point. It's one change, but we're getting closer to the midterm section. And because our planning horizon for this plan is 20 years, what we did is we generally took the midpoint, conservative midpoint of Kaiser Marston's 10-year study and extrapolated that out 10 years to get a total of around 5.5 million square feet of development that the market will demand over the next 20 years. The second guiding principle that the community gave us was to make sure that we were flexible, to allow for innovation and reaction to market realities. And one of the ways we did that was the type of code that we developed, which is a form-based code. So what is a form-based code? It's important to understand what a form-based code is and before you can understand what it is. And I think we're all more familiar with traditional development codes that focus more on the separation of land uses. So you have retail over here, commercial, office, industrial, all separated out, and they create separate development standards for each use. Form-based code isn't concerned with that as much. It's more concerned with the size and shape of buildings, the location of those buildings on the site, in this case, specifically pulled to the street instead of being separated from the street by a parking lot, and the relationship, and that goes right to this, the relationship between the buildings on the site and the public realm. And the public realm itself is really where the building meets the street, where the building meets civic life, where we all are living on a day-to-day basis. And because it's only concerned with the size and shape of buildings and not necessarily the use inside, that allows for uses to come and go over time without the building having to need to be rebuilt. And of course, that encourages a mix of uses in the area. So that's section one, that's the vision. That's what the community sent us out into the world to go work with and to create a draft plan. And that's what we did, and that's section two, the draft specific plan. So this is the heart of this presentation. There's a lot of information here. I've tried to organize this in kind of from the big picture and then working down through the detail, each layer getting a little bit more detailed. So as you can see, there's this arrow pointing down. Every time you see that arrow on a slide, that means we're changing topics, we're moving on in concepts, and we're getting a little bit more detailed as we go down. So area-wide, first, the biggest picture item, obviously, is infrastructure. So mobility infrastructure, parks infrastructures, and utility infrastructure. The community gave us a goal for mobility and parks to create and enhance interconnected network of streets, bicycle facilities, sidewalks, multi-use trails, and transit opportunities to create a truly multimodal area. Obviously, that includes the French Valley Parkway. We all know that phase one is done, and hopefully phase two is going to be on the books soon. Also, it's important to have east-west connections through the area to connect the area to all other parts of the city and region. And that includes the extension of Overland Drive and Cherry Street across the creek over to Diaz. Also, new internal streets within Jefferson. This is probably, arguably, the most important single piece of infrastructure that is needed in the area in terms of realizing the urban design framework that the community has vision for this area. Bicycle improvements, of course, the Winchester-Jefferson bypass area, the Via Montezuma pedestrian bicycle bridge over the creek, Marietta Creek Trail itself, and then, of course, bike lanes will be required on all streets in the future. And anybody who's tried to walk in this area knows that sidewalks are hit and miss if there's even curb and gutter in some areas. The specific plan calls for 20-foot wide sidewalks throughout the Jefferson area as development happens in the future. Public transit, of course, is important. We're working to try to locate a transit center either in the specific plan area or near it, so we can connect to bus rapid transit to get people down to where they work. And of course, we're working with RTA to expand services in the area based on Jefferson's future build-out numbers. Of course, parks and recreation, we would love to see the flood basin up at the northern end of the area turn into what we call Uptown Jefferson Central Park. It's not centrally located, but it kind of conveys the idea. It's a critical piece of infrastructure to realize the vision of the area. As far as utility infrastructure is concerned, obviously we need to develop and maintain a modern utility infrastructure, water, sewer, gas, electricity, and telecommunications. Staff has been in contact over the last couple of years with all of our utility providers, and as of today, they've done capacity analysis, and as of now, sufficient services available. We worked with Rancho Water. They gave us a water supply assessment about a year and a half ago, understanding now that that's a hit and miss kind of moving target, and we'll have to work closely with them moving forward to make sure that that remains the case. So that's the infrastructure. Now we're going to peel off one layer and go one layer deeper and look at the districts within the area itself. The community gave us the goal to define districts and neighborhoods, and that's what we tried to do with the community. The community told us that we should come up with these districts based on historical uses and the current uses. It's not like Old Town where there's a clear connection between history and today, architecture and today, uses and today. We had to use what was available to us, and we drew these conclusions. First is the Uptown Hotel and Tourism Center at the southern end of the specific plan area. It's already got hotels there. It's seen as the primary visitor and tourist serving district. Anticipated land uses there are hotels, convention and meeting spaces, restaurants, as well as mixed use and residential. The residential in this area would only be, it wouldn't be allowed on the first floor, it would only be on upper floors because it's primarily a commercial entertainment district. 5 stories by right in this area, but 8 stories by right if it's a full service hotel. That means convention and restaurant spaces, meeting spaces. Next, we have the Creekside Village, just north of Hotel Tourism Center. This is a primarily residential neighborhood. It's intended to be a walkable urban residential neighborhood located immediately adjacent to Marietta Creek and the trail. Its anticipated land uses include urban residential units, as well as neighborhood serving mixed-use commercial retail. Projects in this location, residential projects can be fully residential or they can be mixed use, and it's a 5-story building height. Within the Creekside Village, there is an overlay, the Creekside Village overlay, and that includes the parcels directly adjacent to Jefferson Avenue and visible from I-15. This is a mostly commercial area, so it would require ground floor commercial and no ground floor residential. And projects here would need to be mixed use, not residential only. The Uptown Arts District, with the biggest district in the area, is based on kind of the eclectic mix of businesses that are there now, is intended to be a vibrant, eclectic cultural arts district with convenient access to Marietta Creek. So art galleries, artist lofts, workspaces, performance venues, live-work units, as well as urban residential units. Projects here that are residential can be fully residential, mixed use, and or live-work. And it has a 5-story max height. Just like Creekside, there's an overlay in the Uptown Arts District. It's called the Wilder Hills Residential Overlay. It's the parcels directly adjacent to the creek. This is a strictly residential overlay, provides a unique residential neighborhood nestled between the local arts cluster and the creek. All of these developments here will be oriented towards the creek to take advantage of the creek walk as well as the views. It's urban residential only. It's low to mid-rise, 3 stories maximum. The Uptown Center, which straddles a large portion of Jefferson Avenue and is directly adjacent to I-15, is really the urban core of the Uptown Jefferson area. It's an employment hub. It's anticipated to be dominated by commercial, retail, office, and employment uses, but also it's allowable to have urban residential units and live-work units as well. Residential projects could be fully residential, mixed use, or live work, and it has 8 stories by right. Uptown Sports District is the district to the farthest to the north of the area, and it's a mixed use district that will complement the nearby active passive recreation area, hopefully in the flood basin. Hotels, guest serving facilities, commercial retail uses, urban residential units, office and employment uses. Again, residential projects can be fully residential or mixed use, and it has a 6-story maximum. And of course, the last is Marietta Creek Recreation Open Space. This is intended to be trails, trailheads, active passive park facilities, sport courts and ball fields at the northern area, as well as picnic areas. So those are the districts. And now we're going to go, again, another level further, and we're going to take a look at the blocks and the streets internal to the district itself, with the idea that the community gave us a goal to improve transportation, mobility, connectivity, and circulation. So let's talk about the blocks. On the left, there is Old Town. The red is the street, the street pattern in Old Town. I think we're all familiar with the grid pattern, block pattern. It's pretty standard. Any downtown we've ever been to, probably in our lives, is this pattern. It's easy to walk. It's easy to navigate. It creates an increased amount of street frontage, which increases property values. It's generally a pleasant experience. On the left, or on the right, we have Jefferson Corridor. And mind you, this isn't to scale. Jefferson Corridor, that photo is much larger than the photo on the left. It's I wouldn't say that's walkable. It's huge blocks. It's auto-oriented, obviously. So if we take a look at the stats of those two blocks, if you look on the left, Old Town Block has a perimeter of about 1,400 linear feet, or 2.75 acres. It'd take you about 10 minutes to walk around it. If you look at the block on the right, which is in Jefferson, it has a perimeter of over a mile, 6,250 linear feet, and it's 40 acres. So it's roughly 20 times the size of a block in Old Town. So why do we want smaller blocks in an urban environment? It's obviously easier to walk around. It's easier to find your destination. It increases the amount of street frontage in the area, which increases property values. And most importantly, it provides the human scale, and it creates the urban character that is the vision of this area that the community has made very clear. So if you look on the left, in the dark gray there, that's the current street pattern throughout the entire area. And we've put together what we call our hypothetical street pattern. This is not set in stone. This is just to demonstrate that if you take the existing streets and you add some streets to it, you can develop a street grid pattern throughout the area. These are the actual block size standards. Now these blocks are actually larger than your average size downtown block, but we encourage and allow, the plan does, that if development wants to come in and build smaller blocks, they're encouraged to do that. This is just the maximum. So that's the streets. It's critical to the plan. Now we're going to move down another layer, and we're going to talk about development standards for individual projects on individual sites. So this is a form-based code, and a form-based code is less concerned about the use inside the building and more concerned about the form and location. So if we talk about density, a form-based code is also not nearly as concerned with units per acre or floor area ratio or the maximum square footage that is allowed on a site. If a building can fit in the maximum floors that are allowed in that area, and it can meet all of its development standards, it's meeting the intent of the plan. And you can see here that this is just a mock-up, but if this was a 5-floor volume that the building could fit into, then if the building fit into it, we're not concerned with how many units or what the floor area ratio is of that building. It meets the intent of the plan. These are some examples of volumes that would be allowed in the area. So this is a 40-foot height volume, a 3-story building. These are some of the buildings that might fit into that volume. This is a 97-foot volume, a 5-story building, something of this nature. 133-foot, a 7 to 8-story building. Obviously, this is more intense, but this is what would fit into that volume. This is just an example. The building doesn't have to fill up the volume, and most times they wouldn't. They would utilize this concept of a setback, which creates some architectural dynamic and some usable space for the tenants. So if we look at the maximum heights across the entire area, you start to notice that the higher maximums are obviously adjacent to the freeway. And as you start moving towards the creek, it steps down to 5 stories, and then it eventually steps down all the way to 3 stories. This was done for 2 reasons. One, based on the character of the actual individual districts, but also to step down and create a view of the hills to the west that can be shared by all the districts. So that's the maximum height, maximum building size. We'll talk about the styles of buildings that are contemplated in the plan. There really are 8 individual urban styles. The first being the duplex, triplex, quadplex. Clearly the least intense, less dense, mainly in our residential areas. It's 2 or 3 or 4 separate attached residential units in one building. The diagram on the left here is intended to demonstrate where all buildings will be placed on a site. You can see that the street is in the foreground, the alley is in the back, and the parking is the hash marked, which is the rear 50% of the site, with the buildings ultimately pulled all the way up to the build to line. The next type is a mansion apartment. Same thing as a duplex, triplex, quadplex, except it's usually more than 4 units. It could be 6, 7, 8 units. Again, building pulled to the front, parking in the rear. Next is a row house. It's a building containing attached residential units that are connected by common walls. and arranged side by side to give the appearance that it's a continuous facade. They typically have their own backyards, and they would be arranged on the site, just like everything else. Stacked flat is your typical apartment, usually of a similar configuration, stacked above or below. They would also be pulled to the front with parking in the rear. Live work, the only difference between live work and a stacked flat is that usually the retail unit on the bottom floor is connected internally to an upstairs residential unit, and the owner lives and works in the same area. Same configuration. Courtyard building is similar, it just has a courtyard. Similar configuration. Commercial block, this is a more intense mixed-use building, often referred to as a liner building, where the mixed-use part of the building is wrapped around a parking structure, where the building is presented to the street and you can't see the parking structure from the street. And the most intense of all of the building types is the tower on podium. It's a building that's configured around a central core tower with the first 3 to 5 floors expressed as a podium building. Same thing, building in the front, parking in the rear. Okay, that's the building types. So we talked about how tall they can be, what their volumes are, what types of buildings or what style of building based on kind of their character. Now we want to talk about the frontage types. This is the public realm. This is where the building itself meets the street, meets where people are engaging with each other, where civic life begins. We call it the public realm. And this picture is a good example of that. You can see on the right, the building, it has businesses, they're spilling out onto the street and people are interacting. That's the public realm. There are really 6 different styles of street frontage: the shop front, gallery, 2-story gallery, forecourt, arcade, and stoop and porch. I think we're all familiar with the shop frontage. Typically retail, large windows, large doors, and a continuous facade from the ground all the way to the roof line. Arcade frontage is similar, except it has a covered walkway with the building pulled out over the walkway. Gallery frontage is usually a covered walkway with a balcony on top. The 2-story is just a 2-story balcony above. Forecourt is really just a notch in a building that creates a public plaza. The stoop frontage is a primarily residential frontage characterized by a raised entrance, which provides privacy for the residential tenants, as well as the porch frontage. This is similar, but raised up to provide privacy. So combining building forms and building frontages is actually encouraged in the plan. You can see by this picture, if you get a variation in the styles, it provides some depth and some dynamic that is interesting and inviting. So that's the frontage. Now we'll talk about the actual sidewalk itself. This is pretty simple. It seems like there's a lot going on this slide, but if you can just forget all those red marks, really what's happening here is that, and I mentioned this before, is that the sidewalks in the future will be 20 feet wide, which is the same for new development in Old Town. I think you can look to the Front Street Plaza on 3rd and Front. It's a good example of the size and the depth of the sidewalk. So the first 10 feet from the curb to the property line will be city-owned right-of-way. And from the property line 10 feet back to the build-to line where the building will be sidewalk, but it will be accessible to the public as a sidewalk. This is a different version where you can see a sidewalk cafe is in that privately owned 10 feet, but it still leaves 10 foot for pedestrians. Pretty simple. So quickly, parking standards. Parking standards are about 2 things: the location of parking and the ratio, the number of parking spaces needed. So in terms of location, like I mentioned before, all parking needs to be internal to the site, screened from the street, not visible from the street, accessed via an alley or other driveway. So if you had a development in an internal block in Jefferson, you would need to place it in the hash marked area there. This is an example that I showed before where the building lines the street and the parking's in the rear. The exception is if you have a development along I-15, you can see that the parking, the hash mark area allowed for parking can be pulled all the way to the property line up against the freeway, but would still need to be screened from internal streets in the Jefferson area. On the other side of the area against the creeks, you would need to screen the entire parking area because the buildings on the creek are intended to be oriented towards the creek. These are the actual parking ratios. There's a lot going on this screen as well, but I would direct your attention to the residential, retail, service, commercial, and office, the grayed out. Those are our general parking requirements. These are lower than what we see in most codes, or most urban codes even, and we've done that on purpose based on our experience in Old Town and some of the success we've had with starting standards low and adjusting as we've become more successful and parking needs become more intense. So I'll stop there. Those are all the standards in the plan. Those are all the things that must be complied with. Now we're going to move on to urban architecture design guidelines. Now, in Old Town, there is a clear distinction and connection to history through architectural styles and uses even. There's not that deep connection in the Jefferson area. So we are not going to require specific types of architectural styles to be utilized, but there are some very tried and true architectural elements that we would like to see implemented into all developments as they come through the planning application process. The first being that if you do choose an architectural style, stay true to it. Stay true to its element and its form and carry it throughout your development. We'd like to see a base zone which emphasizes the scale and engagement of the pedestrians, the public realm, a middle zone which provides the primary facade, and the top element which terminates the building. Regardless of how tall your building is, these elements apply. We would also like to see a mix of building forms which creates a dynamic depth to the street edge. Buildings at corners or at intersections are encouraged to address the intersection, and buildings that are on the corner are encouraged to have tower elements and roof line elevations. You can see the building in the front clearly does a better job than that in the building in the background, where it just has a flat roof all the way across. We would like to see four-sided architecture, and what that means is that if a building is not abutting another wall, or excuse me, a wall is not abutting another wall, then there needs to be architectural detail on that wall. So architecture all the way around the building. Variations in colors and materials should be used. Again, combinations of different frontages and types of frontages should be mixed together. Awnings and canopies and overhangs are encouraged. When a development is adjacent to a public plaza or a public space, that development should engage and orient towards that space and not turn its back. When there is a step back on upper floors, developments are encouraged to utilize those as space for the tenants. Street furniture is encouraged. Obviously, restaurants are encouraged to have sidewalk cafes. And when possible, a building should be placed at the end of a street to terminate the street view, to enclose the area, create human scale, and develop a sense of place. So those are the design guidelines for buildings. So what about public spaces? Designing public spaces. And there's really three maxims we want people to pay attention to when they're designing public spaces, like a public plaza or so. Does it add to the quality of life, not just for the development, but for the surrounding area? Does it connect the community, and is it accessible and inclusive of everyone? So whether it's urban plazas, neighborhood parks, playgrounds, mini parks and pocket parks, walking and bicycle trails, and multi-use spaces, those three maxims should be taken into account. This is a really cool, I don't know where this is, but seems like a really cool multi-use space. That brings me to the last section in section 2, which is plan administration. So how will the city administer this plan? The community did give us the goal and wanted us to create flexibility in our administration through incentives and a phased compliance. And we tried to do that. And there are some key concepts that before we move into this that came from our visioning, and that was that property owners should not be required to change the use, their building, or their development on their property as a result of the specific plan. If they are happy doing what they're doing, and they are successful doing that, and they want to continue, then they should be allowed to. The plan allows that. New development or revitalization would occur only when a owner chooses to pursue such changes, and if they do wish to pursue, they don't have to do everything all at once. They can phase in working with the plan. So most of the plan is administered similarly to the development code for the rest of the city with some specific differences. The first is legal nonconforming. The plan, if approved, will create legal nonconforming buildings and uses. But if those buildings are on the ground and those uses are in use at the time of the adoption of the specific plan, they will be grandfathered in and allowed to continue doing what they're doing. The difference here is that if an existing legal nonconforming land use is discontinued for a continuous period of 365 days or more, they will lose their grandfather status. So that means if a building has a tenant that's a legal nonconforming tenant or use, and that tenant leaves, and that space isn't filled within 365 days, that space can no longer be reestablished with that nonconforming use. This is a little different, and it came directly from our work with the community. It was going to be 6 months, but it turns out that there was a concern that the economics of the plan and the economics of reality on the ground right now may not be overlapping, and they may not be able to comply with the plan as of today, and they needed a little extra time to make sure that they had use of their property. As an incentive, we've developed an administrative approval of planning application process. The plan has very clear, definitive standards. You either meet them or you don't. If you meet them, we created a process that would allow for expediting the process, that the Director of Planning may, after making those specific findings that all the standards have been met, may approve the application through a notice of an intent to approve. So what that process would be is that if a project comes in and it's working its way through the process, there would be, we'd post the site 20 days before the administrative hearing. If at the administrative hearing the project was approved, a notice would be sent out to the property owners within 600 feet, and that would be 20 days prior to the approval becoming effective. And of course, anyone can appeal the decision of the administrative approval to the Planning Commission, and of course the Planning Commission's decision to the City Council. Specific plan phase compliance. I've said this a couple times. I can't tell you how important it was to the community that the community's guiding principle of make sure everything's based in the market reality and it's flexible. And there's a lot going on this slide, but basically what this is saying is that it's ratcheting up. The more you want to do on your site, the more you have to comply with the plan. So the first level, the lowest level would be you just want to reuse your building. You want to turn it into a restaurant where a restaurant wasn't allowed previously under the existing code. Then you would be subject to just the adaptive reuse standards, which are very minimal and really are mostly about building codes and fire codes, making sure that you're in compliance for public health and safety. That's it. If you want to adjust the outside of your building, you want to change it up a little bit, you would only be subject to the architectural design guidelines. If you want to add up to 10% of the square footage of your building, relative to the new addition only, you would have to follow the architectural design guidelines and the sign standards. If you want to add between 10 and up to 50% of your building, you would be subject to considerably more, but still not all of the specific plan guidelines. And if you want to do anything above 50% and any brand new development proposals will be subject to the entire specific plan. New streets in Luffy. So we talked about the importance of the new streets in the area. So we've come up with a new street in Luffy because the new streets are critical to the successful implementation of the community's vision. And without the new streets, the community's vision cannot be achieved. The new streets benefit all the properties in development within the Uptown Jefferson area because those are the most important thing working towards the urban design and urban feel of the area. A new streets in Luffy would be based on the square foot of a project, and we are currently working on an in lieu fee nexus study to determine the amount of the fee, and that will be ready before we come back to council in July. Lastly, the developer incentive and public benefit program. So the Uptown Jefferson specific plan creates an incredible opportunity for landowners to increase the intensity and use of their project, of their property. And if they want to take advantage of that, then they would take part in our incentives program. So what the incentives program is that if a development proposed development that anything above the threshold of 25 units to the acre or 0.60 FAR, then the additional density, the additional unit, will be subject to the benefits program. So it's easier if I give an example, because it's a little confusing. If a development comes in and it wants to do 26 units, that 26th unit would be the only one subject to the incentives program. And what would happen is that after the developer earned 15% return on investment on that 26th unit, it would share the additional return on investment above that first 15% with the city 50-50. And the city would use that money to for public benefits in the area, including pedestrian bicycle sales, public plaza, street beautification, parks and open space, and public parking. It's important to note, if the developer wanted to incorporate the improvements that I just mentioned into their own project, then the city would credit their share of the incentives program to them for them to do that. That's the plan. So what's next? I think it's important to note that once more, as we've gone through this long presentation here, that the specific plan is based entirely on the vision and direction of the community. Counting 2 weeks ago and counting tonight, we actually have 28 public hearings or notice public meetings to receive input before and after we started developing the plan. And the overall goal, obviously, is to revitalize the area and position it to take advantage of growth over the next 20 years. This is our final adoption schedule as we have it today. Obviously, we're here tonight at City Council, May 12th, and barring any specific direction from the council tonight, the draft SP will be available to the public as early as tomorrow. Then we will have a steering committee meeting to receive input from the community on the plan, and we'll visit all the city commissions. We are scheduled for the Planning Commission and in June 17th, and ultimate City Council consideration for adoption on July 28th, 2015. That concludes my presentation. I'm available for any questions.
Thank you, Luke.
I do.
I don't believe we have any speakers. Is that correct? Okay, we'll certainly entertain questions. Let's all remember that we're looking at questions only on the presentation. We're not talking about recommendations here or amending things here. We have an ample opportunity to do that through the public process and ultimately when it comes back to us at the end of July. So questions on the presentation, and Mrs. Edwards is first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Great presentation, Luke. Will we have a chance to underground all the utilities with this specific plan? Specifically electric lines, overhead electric lines?
Right.
Utility
Well,
lines.
most of the development will be new development, and they will be implementing new streets as well. So I think that we would want them to underground all the utilities to the new developments in the new streets.
And what do you think the chances are of getting that done on Jefferson?
It all depends on money.
Yeah, depends on whether we have development right on the street and when that occurs. Okay, and who is it, we've been getting some emails lately about the water situation, and how does that work exactly? Is it Rancho California Water District that determines whether or not we have enough water for development to move forward?
That's correct.
Okay, so that lies with the water district. And then as far as legal and non-conforming land uses, just a change in tenancy, let's say between now and any time in the future, if there's a restaurant there and somebody just sells the restaurant and somebody just wants to move in and keep it an existing restaurant, that's not impacted by the temporary moratorium, is it?
No.
No. Okay, and there are no changes to the building or anything. So you said they have the option of either changing it to conform with the new specific plan or leaving it as is?
That's correct.
Okay, that's all.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a number of questions, and I'm hesitating to put them in the form of comments or questions. But maybe for you or for the city attorney, is it possible that I could raise some issues and ask the Planning Commission to study those things before it gets to council so that there's just some sort of analysis of those things before they get to us? Sure. And of course, staff.
Certainly, you could put those in writing to the staff and ask to have those considered as part of the staff's analysis and the Planning Commission analysis.
Okay, so, and would...
Best way to do it.
Okay, sounds good. So now you've asked for a question period. You want me to do that now or wait for the comment period? What's your pleasure?
Well, we'll there will be no comment period.
Okay.
It's because we're only taking questions tonight.
Okay, very good. Well, I mean, our dialogue up here as far as.
There is none.
Fair
It's-
enough.
It's receive and file, and, correct, Mr. City Attorney?
Yes, that's the way it was set up.
Okay, then, Ms. Turley Trejo, make some good notes, because you're going to have to take this, what I'm about to go over. And of course, Luke, if you can kind of take these things down as well. And I concur with Councilmember Edwards. Great presentation, very thorough, and about as concise as you can make something as comprehensive. A couple of things. With Old Town, we were fortunate to have several things going for us. Number one is we had redevelopment areas going for us, and so that gave us a source of revenue in which to invest in the community. And we also took the bold approach of removing all parking requirements. We don't have the luxury of either one, or at least I haven't seen the parking requirement for the Jefferson Uptown plan that we're talking about here. So maybe if we can examine that, because it speaks to how we're going to implement this. Which leads me to my second point here. I love the plan. You guys did an excellent job, very comprehensive. The question I want to ask and have the Planning Commission look at, because I'll bring it up when it comes here to the council as well, is are the uses that you've brought up practical? Are they implementable? And what I mean by that is it looks good on paper, but was any parcel analysis done for the area? And I want you, a good example, and I don't want to digress into it, was the car wash incident that came up in the 1 acre piece that we're dealing with on Jefferson and Del Rio. It's a 1 acre parcel. We could put a nice drawing on the plan, but is it really implementable? How many units can you get there in a practical manner and meet the parking ratio requirements and also keep it interior to the building? If you tell me that we need 2 levels of subterranean and 1 podium just to get 50 units on site, then that very well is probably not going to be financially feasible any time within the next,
Mike,
I don't know.
Can I interrupt you? And I really, it's not my intent or Peter's intent to cut discussion and cut comment, but the agenda item is what it is. It's receive and file. So I think it's very appropriate for you to ask that question for the Planning Commission to
That's what I'm doing.
bring back. I don't think you should be elaborating on everything that you're elaborating on.
Well, these things.
Question, are the uses implementable? Next question, you know?
I think I need.
I don't mean to.
No, but Mr. Mayor, I think I need to explain what I mean, other than are they implementable?
In the context of the agenda item.
I think I'm very much in context of the agenda item. I'll move on to the second topic in that regard. We're talking about going to smaller blocks. If the smaller blocks start including parcels that are 3 acres, one's 1 acre, one's 5 acres, are we getting into an area where you need an assemblage of properties to build anything? How practical is that, and how does that speak to implementing the plan? Has any analysis of that been done? If it hasn't, we just have a piece of paper, and then we're rezoning people's property and saying, this is now your new use. You really can't do anything.
Mike, you're really getting into an area. We'll have ample time to do this when it comes back to us. That's the purpose for the whole process laying out the way it does. You're getting ahead of all the other commissions. You're getting ahead of the public's right to review, and you're getting ahead of us when it comes back to us. It just, you're raising good points, and Mike, you know me, I hate to do that, but that's not where we are tonight.
Okay, listen, Mr. Mayor, since you run the meeting, I'm going to respect that, but with all due respect, I want these things looked at before they get to me so that I can analyze what the other commissions have done. This is my time to tell them before they see it.
I have no problem with that, but you're going way beyond the pale.
Okay, we'll try to.
That's all I'm asking.
Okay, good. We'll try to curtail it. I'd like some variance language. Based on all that I'm saying here, there are a lot of rules in this plan. I am doggone confused. I'd like to see some sort of variance language that says, listen, you may get a piece of property that doesn't conform. How do we fix it? Development standards just seem very strict and all over the place, and I'm very confused, but we'll look at it. I mentioned when we last launched this infrastructure financing districts, if we can look at that and see what the possibility of implementing that here is. A possible review of the plan every 2 or 3 years or whatever's appropriate. whether it's every 12 months or 24 months, because this is a comprehensive, very elaborate plan. Form-based zoning, if we can look at adjacent land use compatibility a little bit more in depth, if what I'm hearing is we don't care what goes there as long as the buildings look the same, how do we reconcile residential next to a restaurant or next to an open space area? Maybe you do, but I'd like to see more of that. The 20-foot sidewalk issue speaks again to the parcel analysis. Great concept, but taking the Jefferson aspect, Jefferson and Del Rio aspect, it further shrinks that property, making development a little bit more constrained. And then lastly, some sort of look at, we're not dealing with a lot of vacant land in the area. And so what you have there now is land that generates some, or uses today that generate revenue. And you also look at uses that no doubt currently have financing, encumbrances on them. So in order to implement any type of changes, you have to exceed the revenue that they're making in order to tear them down, to make more, and also satisfy any loans on that. Have we looked at how that works and the possibility of doing that? Those are the things, all those things that I mentioned, if you can have the commissions below this council look at and bring me their analysis before it gets up to us. And lastly, Mr. Mayor, my fear or concern is I cannot go over all of this in detail in one council meeting when this gets to us. It will end up getting sent back to answer all of these questions and will not speak to us, for me anyway, a speedy approval, and may delay the process. So better to get this stuff now.
Well, I certainly agree with what you're saying. Remember also that you have access to staff throughout the entire process. Now that you've seen it, you always have, and any of us and the public have the right to ask any questions we want along the way. So by the time it gets to us, all these things should be fleshed out, and I agree with what you're saying. They should be fleshed out. So.
And if I went afield?
You did, but it's all right.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Matt or Mike? Matt?
Just one quick one, and I'm sure we'll see this when we see the EIR and the specific plan and so forth, but just concerns related to flood issues. You know, it's happened before in the area, and I'm sure it's being addressed adequately, but when you know, put parcels or property adjacent that close, it becomes a big issue, and so I'd like to see that clearly addressed.
Sure.
I have just one question. I think everything else has been discussed. It's been a good discussion. You talked about property being vacant for 365 days, and at the end of that period, if it's not in use, they lose their grandfather status. What if a building owner comes to us and says, you know, I'm sorry, it's been 360 days. I have a lease that's out. I expect it to be signed in 2 weeks. Do we have a mechanism to create a variance? I mean, I would hope they don't have to go through a specific plan amendment process just for something like that. How are we going to handle that?
Well, we do have a process for that. In my attempt to be summarizing and quick, I didn't get to that specifically, but yes, after that 365 days, there is a mechanism for a hardship that they can apply for, that they can come and is approvable by the community development director, to where we can extend out their grandfather status based on a hardship.
Administratively?
Administrative.
Okay, very good. That's all I have. I appreciate the presentation. It's been great.
I ask a question to elaborate on
ahead.
that? So there's an existing office space. Office space goes vacant for 365 days. It maintains its office use regardless of what overlying specific plan use is put on it?
Right, during that 365.
But what about after the 365?
It would be subject to the specific plan.
So if there's an existing building with an office, I want to make sure I got this, that ends up having a vacancy, that vacancy is not filled within 1 year, it can no longer be used as an office space.
No, office would be allowed. It depends on what the use is. If the use is a legal non-conforming use, and then that use stops, you know, they're no longer using it for that, that 365 days go by, they can no longer put a legal non-conforming use or a non-conforming use into that space.
What if you can't get a user? Case in point, it's happening right now.
That's the hardship clause.
Right, that's what we just talked about.
That's the hardship clause. And is there, have we got a set of qualifications for hardship?
Yes, we do. I mean, they're general right now, but we can beef those up, and we can go over those with you.
Okay, okay.
Okay, and let's all remember too, as we said in the beginning, this is a work in progress, so there may still be, and obviously there are still some things yet to be determined, and as it goes through and gets fleshed out through all the processes. We did not have it on the schedule to be ready to present tonight. The only reason we changed the schedule was after the moratorium discussion, and I think we all know the reasons for that, so that when it comes back, we have some meat on the bones that we can have a valid discussion.
And Mr.
of
Mayor,
it,
this
so.
is a huge undertaking.
It's a huge undertaking. It's a very long process once, presumably, if it's approved. It's a 20-year plan. It could take longer than that. But once it's complete, we've got many, many terrific areas in Temecula, but I think clearly this will become the jewel of our city, and indeed, uptown Temecula. So it's certainly something we look forward to. Luke, thank you again. We know we caught you a little bit off guard with a quick response 2
Hey, give me
weeks
2
ago.
weeks.
So we appreciate that very much.
Thank you.
And thank you to everybody. Okay, with that, we have a city manager's report.
Just that I wanted to commend Luke Watson and the planning department for putting this together on short notice, and
Really good.
appreciate the effort this evening, so thank you.
Thank you. We did ask a lot, and we're aware of it, but it needed to be done, so thank you. Mr. City Attorney.
Yes, Mr. Mayor and members of the council, I do have a report tonight. We had 3 items in closed session. With respect to the Reyes litigation and the labor relations matters, we have no reportable actions under the Brown Act. With respect to the claim of Fleur Corporation, the council, by a vote of 5-0, authorized the settlement of that action in the amount of $10,235.63. That's very specific because it's all property damage.
Thank you.
5-0 sounds good.
5-0 sounds good.
We have 5.
Okay, with that, we'll entertain a motion to adjourn to the next meeting of May 26th.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Marianne, a shake head second. All's in favor?
Aye.
We stand adjourned.
Woo-hoo.